good afternoon, and you're welcome along to the Bank Holiday edition version of Local Media this week. And hopefully the weather has improved a little bit from the wetness and dreariness that we have had, we'll say, in the month of July, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But Jim Collins is footing turf, so he's unavailable. But the rest of the crew are here. So John S. Kelly, Pat O'Brien and David Fleming, good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon, Luke.
Good afternoon, Luke.
Yeah, so I said my time on the bench sadly has been shortened. I thought I was going to be there for a while, but I'm going to start with a bit of good news, and then we'll get into the depressing stuff. A photograph caught my eye on page 2 of the Clare Echo.
Yeah.
And there's also a picture on page 4 of the Champion. And Bart McMahon has it in the Echo. Wolfhounds return to Bunratty. Cade Mead Defaulcha, Ballantee, Magella Wilson greeting the farm manager Niall Maloney at Bunratty Castle in Fort Park with newly arrived Irish Wolfhounds, 12-week-old Rian, meaning King, and 1-year-old Mida, named after the 5th province of Ireland in Celtic times. And I think it's fair to say it's a lovely photograph there taken by Eamon Ward. And good news, we'll say. The dog's coming back to, I suppose, for historical reasons. Dave, you're the history man here, so have you any thoughts on the subject?
Well, they were always valued amongst the elite of whatever time. Right up to today, they're still valued because of their size, I suppose, and they reflect that majesty that the well-to-do often enjoyed. And I think they were introduced into Bunratty in the 1960s, John.
That's right. Well, people sometimes ask the question, what's the earliest recording of the Coo's hound?
Yeah.
Okay. And the earliest that I could come across would have been in the town. Okay. But then there's also the early evidence of the Irish wolf long before Christianity. Okay, so you're looking at an unbroken tradition.
Yeah, and they're quite. I came across them recently up in Mayo. They can be quite fierce.
That's a question. In the article there, you see. They speak of the gentleness of this giant.
They have no interest at all in humans. But if another dog crossed their path, or another animal, I mean, they're called a wolfhound for a reason.
Yeah.
They would very quickly kill them.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure these are very mild-mannered and gentle. Sure. But then...
Cuchulainn. We have in the literature, in the early Irish literature, we have Cuchulainn shortening his journey by hitting a ball with his stick.
And killing the Hound of Cullen.
And killing the Hound of Cullen, which led to serious outcomes. So you have.
But anyway, we hope we hope none of the Clare hurlers will be around Bunratty to do damage.
No, and I'd say all going well at some stage. I know there are preliminary plans for this crew to take a visit down to Bunratty, so you never know, we might get to do an interview with the two hounds in question,
Cullen.
Exactly. Right.
The Hound of Cullen.
Exactly. Right.
By the way, just purely a further into, do you think our listeners would remember from their national school days the idea of the hound guarding the door of the banquet hall, sitting outside? And now you saw as well that Cuchulainn killed.
Yeah.
He killed his Irish wolfhound. So, and you saw the outcome of that. It's great literature, early Irish literature, telling us about so now when we go to the Bunratty next time round, we go straight to see these giant
hounds.
Exactly. Right. Well, as I said, you're listening to Local Media this week, sponsored by Ruth Griffin Photography, where we're talking about what's in the media, namely the Clare Champion and the Clare Echo. And I'm going to go to page 1 of the Champion. The main headline there, Jessica Quinn has, another good news story. Pat, CPR skills essentials, says hero doctor. Actions of quick thinking. Ennis doctor saves life of hurling fan at Dublin train station.
Yeah, Jessica Quinn's the leading story there in the Clare Champion, Luke. an instructor who helped save the life of a hurling fan after he collapsed in a busy Dublin train station, has modestly told the Clare chairman, "I think there was a lot of luck involved and I was in the right place at the right time." Dr. Carly Lewis, who is originally from the Tuller Road, in a spring interaction and performed CPR on the man who is in his 70s after discovering he had no pulse. Fortunately, he is now doing well, and following the experience, Dr. Lewis is appealing to the public to get basic life support training. The more people we are trained, the better, and the outcomes are better all around, she said. Dr. Lewis was in a conversation with her sister, having come from the match, from watching the Clare play Kilkenny in the All-Ireland semi-final at Cork Park when the emergency situation unfolded. She recalled they were about to get on the train when she noticed a commotion on the platform. So it was a good news story. She performed CPR and another doctor came along and helped her.
No, if she
was
didn't
pregnant,
come along, though.
and actually she was pregnant for 7 weeks or something as well. So she needed some help. So another doctor, lucky enough, came along and they got the emergency services, and the man is okay. But of course, she's emphasising that the way that people should maybe get training in CPR, and that, which is. Really,
would you be able to step in, Pat?
I wouldn't know, because I never.
And I wouldn't either. I wouldn't be. John, would you be able to perform CPR?
I did the usual couple of days, about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And
around the time of Cuchulainn.
So I would support fully the idea that the radio, that we would carry this message until, in fact, we have a training scheme going in our immediate area.
Yeah, and I suppose, the whole thing, there has been a lot of progress with regards to defibrillators being available, in most villages and at sports venues as well, which is a significant, there are significant costs and there's maintenance costs with them as well, But
that's where somebody has a heart attack, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in this case, the defibrillator would have been no good because the person had was unconscious, had no pulse, so had stopped breathing.
But they got him back breathing, and his pulse came back, and they came on in with the defibrillator, and
so the defibrillator came along after, so it was useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, that's the two good news stories out of the way now.
You have defibrillators now in most GA clubs and in villages.
Do you know who is the
training?
Well,
we have a list of about 20 people. There's a list of 15 or 20 people that do the training every year.
Very good.
Yeah, around in locally, and they might do it I think maybe every 2 years or something. You go back and you have to redo.
Okay. Well, listen, that's the good news out of the way.
I know there's one
we're on to the bad.
in O'Callaghan's Mills there on the community centre, beside the GA grounds, and then you have another one on the wall in Kilkishen in the GA grounds as well. So
good news.
I suppose they're kind of all the GA clubs.
Yeah,
and I'd say a lot of sporting organisations haven't. Right now, bad news.
What is it?
Well, sure, page one, and we didn't really need to see this written down on paper to have a fair idea. Wettest July on record hurt Clare tourism and farming.
Yeah.
Now, you spoke last week about Clare tourism being hurt by 40% of the hotel stock not being available due to housing refugees. Owen Ryan has the article there. The wettest since records started to be kept at Shannon Airport 77 years ago, John, just before Cuchulainn's time.
And Pádraig has it there on page 19 as well. Luke, on
Are you also picking up the message coming from the media, the national media, with regard to what we're going to have in the future years, which is warmer summers and wetter summers. So the good news is we can look forward to a continuation of it. How do you make
it's no surprise. Our scientists have been telling us this for a very long time. But it reminds me of some of the wet summers we would have had in the 1980s when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Really?
So in that regard, it's no different. I remember being stuck inside every day and
Do
looking
you?
out. I do.
Well, usually if you get good weather in June, or early May, June,
May.
Yeah,
next thing July and August is usually
it will
bad.
be bad. St. Swithin's Day.
St. Swithin's Day.
And it did rain on St.
It
Swithin's
did,
Day.
it did.
But it seems the farmers are suffering, and the Owen Ryan interviewed the county chair of the Irish Farmers Association, Thomas Lane, who said that since the new acre scheme, now this is the what was formerly called REPS, and it was formerly called something else. A lot of farmers have signed up for it, and it's based around biodiversity, all the environmental things that they have to do. A lot of farmers signed themselves up not to cut fields until July 1st, right?
Now, can you throw into that mix as well for the wider community that we're likely to see a shocking rise in the price of flour this year because of the difficulties emerging out of Ukraine.
Possibly, but I don't think we get our flour, our wheat doesn't really come from Ukraine, I'd
But
say.
we
get a lot of it from Britain.
Take oats and rye at the moment in Ireland.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been
Well, exactly.
Very
And for the
badly.
last few years, we can have very bad end of summers around harvest time, around August, September. Some of the fields the farmers here, according to Thomas Lane, they've been unable to get into the fields to cut silage.
Do you think that the Irish populace in general are tuned in to the reality of the weather situation now?
It's very hard, I think, nowadays, John, with experts, so-called experts, and if you go anywhere near media of a social variety, where you'll be told 102 different variations of the same story, where one side will tell you, oh, global warming, the icebergs are melting, we're all doomed, and on the other crowd they're saying, relax, it's all okay, let's burn more fossil fuels. You know? Very
What
hard.
do you think?
Well, I think it's maybe somewhere in between, but if you look at, we'll say, the rest of Europe, like Corfu and various places where they've had, very serious hot weather. Now, we'd nearly call it unseasonably hot weather here in May. May into June. We're sort of not used to it a bit, and more regular service has turned up. It may be that the seasons are going out of sync, I think, as to what we traditionally would have been used to.
Well, I would agree with that, Luke, because over the winter months we got very little frost. We have been getting very little frost in the last 2 or 3 years.
I wouldn't bank too much on that last thing because the warm waters from the equator that normally come up through the drift system up into the Atlantic and warming, keeping our coasts warm. Okay?
Yeah.
That's also undergoing. It hasn't been mentioned very often.
The North Atlantic
recently.
drift,
Okay.
and that the scientists are worried about that.
That's
and at the moment,
That's
blocking.
That's down below us now. And
Yes,
that's why we're
that is below us
Yes.
and keeping all the warm weather from getting to us, but all the North Atlantic wet weather has come in as a result. Now, if that changes in any regard, as you say, John...
It is. I'm not giving you John Kelly's view of this.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the what's emerging from the research groups.
Well, just
It's bound to have some effect.
on the weather here, the Hinch Hotelier Michael Vaughan has said the area had fewer visitors than in July. It has dampened down demand for people coming to the seaside, he said.
Yeah.
This year has been reasonably good, but in the height of the season you expect to sell every room every night, and that hasn't been the case this season.
Yeah.
There has been a lot more cancellation than normal. Nothing huge, but it's definitely weather related. Anyone down in the village of the Hinch will tell you they have very few visits. The Strand has been completely empty most days. It has affected coffee shops, ice cream parlours, all of that. It would go down it wouldn't go down as a good summer so far.
Yeah. Now, on the one hand, the hoteliers are saying there's no rooms in Clare. And on the other hand, another hotelier says he can't get people to fill his rooms.
Yeah, well, probably, that was probably back in June when the weather was good. We were hearing about that stuff. About
It's very fickle. But nobody is going to come out in bad weather to a seaside resort, so you do have to feel for them all right. You have to take it. You have to take the weather as it comes, and you have to make hay when the sun shines.
How are you going to heat your house this winter? That's the question which a lot of people in Ireland are asking themselves. What medium will they use to heat?
What medium?
What energy? You're going to have to heat your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the majority of people in Ireland, I see it somewhere in the paper today, the majority of the people in Ireland heat their houses with oil.
Oil.
Yeah.
Oil,
I've got gas.
Oil. Yeah.
is
Gas will be taken,
which
but
is
it'll be
more
way down.
Will you light fire?
But that wouldn't be to heat the house. That might heat the room that we're sitting in.
The end result won't make one bit of difference. You know, whether it's going to heat your house or just to look at it and admire it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I'm concerned about. What you use as to light your fire is going to have an impact on the climate.
Well, John, it's less than 1% of what we produce here in Ireland. What about China, India, or the big nations? They're sprouting out.
Do you expect China to bend the knee?
And
The world
and South America.
You're dead right about the fact that China is so vast that any kind of abuse of a fuel coming out of China is going to be far, far greater. Why would you expect China to be nice to the rest of the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if all those big nations aren't doing it, what's the point in Ireland doing it? Because it's less than 1% here in this country.
Yeah.
They're not going to change it.
We have our share to do. I think we
have
have
our share
our
to do,
small
admittedly,
share.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
agree with you, Pat. But to be fair to the Chinese, they will soon overtake other big countries in the amount of renewable energy that they're producing. So they're massively advanced in terms of solar energy. And so they are very close or on the way to meeting their targets. It's the worst. America is actually one of the worst polluters.
But we're not saying that. I'm not saying you're wrong. By the way.
If Trump comes back in, he's going to make it worse.
And then we go back to what Luke was saying. There is a significant number on the extreme side in the United States that don't believe any of this is happening. That they would say, "Oh, like just what I've said, but in an ideological sense. Sure, we had those bad summers in the past. It's just another bad summer." But the reality is, if you look at the long term, if you look over the last 100 years, the world has recorded the warmest temperature it has ever recorded in terms of the records that we've kept since the 1800s.
Yeah.
That must be... Something is happening.
Something is happening, yeah.
Right. Listen, we'll move on. I just want to refer briefly Dan Danaraz on page 1 of the Echo. Claims and counterclaims have been made following the escalation of the industrial action undertaken by Clare Retained firefighters, which has resulted in rotating station closures since last Friday. So basically, there was an offer made, the offer was refused, and I would be of the opinion, rightly so.
Why?
Because their role is not being recognised with the sacrifice that they do. But I would put a counter to it, saying, as previously stated, they should be full-time, if possible.
Now, the part-time, let's call them the part-time firefighter role, which is what it is. They were on an average of €25,000 per year. Now, that seemingly ranges from stations that are quiet to with the lowest activity to in excess of €55,000 if you're in a busy location.
Yeah.
Now, that's probably the average industrial wage, is it? 55,000 a year?
36 would be.
So it's well above the average wage.
I don't think. Well, we don't have figures, so we can't comment for certain. We don't have figures, we'll say, with regards to the wages for the people in Clare, and I imagine they mightn't be fully obtainable because with the limited number of people that are involved. But David, the issue is that if you're, we'll say, a retained firefighter, you have to be within two kilometres, John, of the station. And if you're on call for that period of time. If you were a full-time operative, as I said, employed full-time, you might be on a slightly better wage. But say, for argument's sake, you're travelling from Tuamgraney, you could be based in Ennis.
Yeah.
And so then you are in Ennis for the period of time that you're working, and then you have time off after that.
I'd agree with you. And I don't know why, why aren't SIP2 looking for a full-time fire service?
I think.
Well, it's full-time.
Like,
Unnecessary.
if you're on, they're proposing, by the way, to increase a retained firefighter's earnings by an additional 5,500 to nearly 7,000 euros. So bringing that 25, I presume bringing that 25 up to 30. So if the part-time firefighters are very close to the average industrial wage, as this increase would suggest, why aren't we employing them full-time?
Yeah, but that's the thing that we say it could be that if you said Scariff, I don't know, there may be in around 10. I think I'm not 100% au fait with the numbers, but just say for argument's sake, say you had 15 people were employed as full-time firefighters for Scariff.
Yes.
They don't need to live within 2 kilometres of the station because they would have their shift times would be allocated, and it would just be along the lines of say, right, David, you were on for the bank holiday weekend, Pat, you were on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week, and John, yourself and myself, we were on the following weekend. And you have that you're providing the service, but you have the freedom to try and have a bit of a life outside of the time, because I said if the bus route goes, you have to go, you know, and it's a service that I don't think is valued enough by a lot of us to understand that, we'll say, the sacrifices that those people make, because they are literally getting I'd say probably 90 to 95% of the same training that the full-time firefighters are getting, and they're doing the same work. It's a bit like the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard people should be full-time as well. I've said that previously, but listen, we hopefully some resolution will come to it. Have you thoughts on it, Pat?
So when you're on call at present time, you can't do anything. You can't go to a match, or you couldn't even go out and take your wife out for a dinner because you could be halfway through thinking that you couldn't be called.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
so what's your solution, Pat?
A children's match or something like that. But I was thinking, like, look, if you had some people then and pay them, like, there isn't a huge amount around the country that does
you're not talking about 1,000 people here. You're talking
John,
a few hundred.
what are your reflections on it?
Me?
Yeah.
I would listen to the firefighters themselves, first of all.
Are they looking for a full-time service?
I haven't heard that mentioned. And nor has it been referred to in the media.
But maybe not full-time, John, but that there would be a structure where that rather than having 3 people that are on call 24/7, we'll say, for a week,
Yes.
that you might have 6 people that are available or designated to the station for that period of time, and they could be from outside the 2 kilometre zone. But they would physically be there.
It seems, Luke, one of the problems is that there's a major shortage of retained firefighters.
That's right.
And so therefore, if you have a full capacity, let's say of 10, that's what a station should have, and yet they have only 5 ever available, though the burden is falling on those 5, and therefore, as Pat says,
and
so it's a recruitment issue.
Yeah, but they will also benefit from that. Those who are, filling in, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because the financial rewards for filling in, the want of a better term, are significant.
But then you have to balance that, I suppose, and they have to balance that with the lifestyle that Pat is talking about.
That's the point.
So,
but John, if you're filling in, you would say you volunteered to fill in for a period of time. So you are saying, I am committing to being available for these number of days. That's fair enough. But we'll say, in general, where you're retained, you're part-time, it's not a full-time gig, and you could be trying to do other stuff as well, and you know, incidents happen. But listen, we'll move on, because page 20 and 21, time is against us now, so we can only give 7 or 8 minutes
of
the Clare Echo, John.
The Echo.
Yes, and there are 2 topics that I'm sure one of which David will have a great comment on, and Pat will throw a few scuds as well. Pádraig has 2 articles. Plans for Shannon Airport rail link included a new report, another report, and then on page 21, Éireann Road Éireann planning to enhance capacity on Ennis Limerick rail services. Now, we'll start with Shannon Airport, David. That's your favorite. One of your favourite topics of choice.
Well, this is an old chestnut, really, and we'll refer to another article here now in the Champion as well at the same time. It's long been suggested and proposed that there would be a rail spur from the Limerick to Ennis line onto Shannon Airport, and at last that is officially recognised now in what is called the New Age of Rail report. This was released last week by it's an all-island strategic rail review between the north and the south, and has been sent to the ministers in both jurisdictions for consultation. It's a plan for the next 25 years, and there are short-term, medium and longer-term objectives. Where exactly the Shannon one falls has not been stated. I suppose it's up to the minister to decide when this would be done. At the moment, it doesn't appear to be any comment about it, except that it's in there. And it's not just Shannon Airport, it's the other airports as well. Like, it's a major scandal that Dublin Airport isn't connected to rail, or that Belfast isn't connected by rail. And so it's...
Or your own lovely Cork.
Or my own lovely Lee. But it's proposing, currently, Ireland has 2,300 kilometres of rail lines. And it's proposing that it would be increased to nearly 3,000 kilometres, which would be a positive, and significantly to electrify the railways.
And do you give any significance to the inclusion in that report to the intention to increase the speed and reduce the actual time between destinations?
The one thing why people choose the car over the railway is speed, that it's faster. For example, if you're taking the train from Limerick to Galway, it takes, I think it takes certainly an hour and a half, if not 2 hours.
You nearly walk it quicker.
So speed is of essence for people today.
So now that's going to come up.
And hopefully, and of course, reducing our carbon emissions, all our diesel trains, for example. So who knows what's going to happen? We have to wait a bit, Luke, to see what might happen.
Yeah, Pat, you referred to, in the pre-production meeting, a man that had a vision, that sort of raised this issue a long time ago. Yeah. A politician.
That's right.
And that not very much was done about it. You tell us about that.
Yeah, the local authority just checked back and relaxed. This is a story from Owen Whitehead. Back in the days of the Celtic Tiger, there was some state enthusiasm for the redevelopment of a rail spur to Shannon, but local authorities didn't have the appetite to pursue it. According to former Clare TD James Breen, Mr. Breen represented Clare from 2002 to 2007, and 16 years after his term ended, a Shannon rail link still something that only exists as a fantasy. I bet there is a certain degree of political interest in progressing it now, with the Green Party in government and the impact of climate change very clear. However, the Deputy Green said that the idea might have been progressed years ago if local authorities in Clare and Limerick had pushed it.
I think...
He said that he met Nelson Cullen, and Nelson Cullen was
he didn't say no.
He didn't say no.
Yeah, I think I'm rare for giving a bit of credit to the councils and the authorities, but I think it might be fair enough comment if we're going back 20 years ago. The rows were still going on about Limerick trying to take over half of Clare, and sort of taking our borders and taking half our land, we'll say, for partying, and the whole city boundaries and stuff like that. And that I would agree there wasn't engagement, because between the two councils, and be a bit like I'd say it was, well, we're not going to support anything that'll do something for Shannon, and we're not going to do something that'll support for Limerick. But I think nowadays there is maybe a little bit more joint up thinking. I'd like to think there is a bit, but we've discussed this here before. You have a railway line that's passing and we say page 21 has that Ireland planning to enhance capacity on the Ennis Limerick rail service, right? So we have a rail link that's passing probably within 2 to 3 miles physically of the airport as it is. And for
it wouldn't take much. It wouldn't take much.
Relatively speaking, it wouldn't take much. And like for any tourist arriving into anywhere in the
for
country.
tourists, for young people, and for old people, people who don't generally have access to cars. Remember also, there's another story in the paper about the success of Shannon Airport and the record numbers flying through this weekend. Shannon Airport will soon be clogged, full of cars. So they'll need, as our population expands, they'll need other opportunities. There's a poor-ish bus link from Limerick.
It's not great.
It's not great.
A poor-ish what?
A bus link to Shannon. Yeah. So a regular train service would supplement that.
Yes, but of course the Rodairn influencers will be looking at the current usage, the style of usage, covering Limerick, the airport, Limerick to Galway.
But John, this goes back to the whole issue. You have 28 buses a day leaving Limerick going to Dublin airport. Yeah. The vast majority of them. You don't have 28
Is that
buses.
the number?
You don't have 28 buses from Limerick heading for Shannon Airport.
And well, it needs Innes, Luke, and down to Bunratty and on. It doesn't even go to Shannon, those buses.
Really?
Yeah.
They go by Bunratty, they stop in Bunratty and on to Limerick.
Yeah.
That green bus.
Yeah,
every half an hour.
They're links, and you have the blue buses from Galway. But like, this is an open goal, and you'd like to think that you have an independent Shannon Airport Authority now. You'd like to think they would be in support of it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear their views on it. Hear Mary Constantine, the CEO's views on this. But I suspect they would. Anything to increase connectivity with the airports would be good.
And from a tourism point of view, it would have to be good.
Yeah.
When we put
you're looking at, in all the conversation there now in the last 5 or 6 minutes, you're looking at projection situations.
Yes.
Now, projection situations are not very attractive to politicians.
Well, the whole new age of rail is very much a projection.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes back to one of Luke's favourite hobby horses, is about planning in the country. This is about a plan for the future, where our population will be much larger. Presumably our tourism continues to increase. We are 20 years behind, if not 30 years behind the rest of Europe in terms of rail transport.
So we asked Michael McNamara in a recent TD, in a recent interview for the Saturday Chronicle, and the question of how attractive is it for a TD, from a potential TD or a TD from our area here, Midwest area, to devote too much time to projection situations. We talked about the need for vision many times. Vision requires projection. It's a gamble about whether the decision we take will or will not come to pass, but I'll be dead.
Now, John, I'll just say 2 things to you. When the Whistling Bridge, aka the Shannon Bridge in Limerick, was being built, the question of putting a 4th lane onto it was brought up, and it would have been at a cost of £300,000 extra. And it was decided, Jesus, there'll never be the capacity for it. We don't need it. When they built the M50, they built 2 lanes of motorway. They said, we'll never fill it. It cost them €1 billion to put a 3rd lane onto it, and they can't add any more to it because of the way the bridges are built. These things, as I said, no planning. you look at figures, and you sort of say some of these could be envisaged, some of them mightn't be. But we'll say our population is increasing. Our population has increased. They're saying that the M50 will be full again in 2 or 3 years' time.
Possibly.
I said, so what are you trying to do? You're trying to get people off the road
Well,
and get them onto rail. Pat,
It's not too long ago since we put a motorway into Shannon, and we put the motorway from Limerick to Ennis. I can't understand how come we couldn't lay out a plan to have the railway
Side by side
into Shannon.
Yeah,
and a place for it.
And you see that in Europe. You see
You
the way
do,
the
yeah, very
roads
much.
and the railways go parallel. I'll tell you why that didn't happen, Pat. Then there's probably a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is the National Transport Authority have no interest in train transport, and they were only interested in roads. And you're right, it would have been and Luke is right by pointing it out. It would be a lot cheaper had they done it initially.
Now, we need to move on, and it's nearly half time, but beforehand, the last paragraph of this Éireann Road Éireann planning to enhance the Ennis Limerick rail service. Deputy Michael McNamara is backing the growing campaign for the railway station at Crusheen to be reopened.
Yes.
But has expressed his disappointment with Éireann Road Éireann's position regarding the proposal. A written response, the company said, "We will keep the case for a railway station at Crusheen under review in line with future demand trends, but at present there is no provision for a station with the current funding profile."
But when Ennis Limerick Galway line was opened by in Road Éireann, they were pulled screaming to open it up. And then they went along and you couldn't even book online.
Yeah,
You couldn't book a seat online. I know you couldn't book a seat online. Now it's online, and it's doubled. It's gone more than 100% since people can book online and go on the train. So there's an awful lot of stuff going on in the background that
Not every little place needs a station.
But Crusheen is obviously the centre of the universe, David. Have you not figured that out yet?
Well, 6 Mile Bridge is
And go back to my original point, it slows at the moment with our slow railway. Percy French would be still laughing from the grave. It's slow, so having loads of stops along that line slows it down.
But if you had extra capacity on the railway, David, you wouldn't necessarily need for every train to stop at every station.
That's fair enough.
Every time.
That's fair enough. And there are more regular trains from Ennis to Limerick.
Yeah. So exactly. Now listen, we're gone way over time as usual. Pat, who's live or dead this weekend? Where are we going to music?
Well,
are we going to be celebrating anything with regards to the Harbour Festival, or what are we talking about?
no, what's it called? We'll have a go with what was she on? Can't wait. Sinead O'Connor, rest in peace, passed away last week, and I heard her recently on radio singing Molly Malone. So the Dubs won the football, and
Jason,
we'll have
don't remind us.
We'll have Sinead O'Connor singing Molly Malone.
And she does a lovely job.
Okay, Sinead O'Connor and Molly Malone will be back in a few minutes.
In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first laid my eyes on sweet Molly Malone.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The late Sinead O'Connor there. You're listening to Local Media This Week on Scariff Bay Community Radio, sponsored by Ruth Griffin Photography. Now, normally in part 2 we get around to East Clare, but because we ran a little bit over, there was one topic that John S. wouldn't allow us to not cover. John, page 4 in the Champion, growth plans for Clare CAMS, I think is the best way I could sort of describe it.
Page 4.
HS. Yeah, it's the HSE has said it's taken steps to provide additional clinical space for Clare child and adolescent mental health services. Owen Ryan has the article there.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Want to talk about.
Yeah.
We've discussed it previously. There's a distinct lack of capacity, I think, in Clare.
Is there a willingness in Clare to address what is such a critical health question? the mental stability of our young people. How many more examples do we have to quote for the decision makers to get up off their proverbial and, respond positively to the article by Owen Ryan on page 4 of the actual Clare Champion?
Well, if you flick the page, Pat, and go to page 5, Dan Danner has the article, Minister at odds with Hospital Group, in relation to trolley numbers and everything else. And what's the one thing these all have in common? The HSE.
Well, earlier this summer, an internal survey of workers in Clare CAMHS showed that almost all staff felt that the Clare organisation, its clinical environment, was totally unsuitable for the support of young people. What's the price that can have to be paid for that?
Well, it says here now, John, if we're going on in this story, in Innes, the opening of the new Station Road Primary Care Centre at the moment of at the movement of existing teams into the facility has resulted in the spinal unit at St Joseph's Hospital Innes being available for use. This includes 10 bookable clinical rooms and 1 group room.
Yeah.
So at least they're getting some space.
Capacity.
They're getting space, capacity.
Yeah.
They're getting 10 bookable clinical rooms and 1 group room that will be provided. The Spindle by Clare CAMS and Clare Children's Disability Services is anticipated that this facility will be available for the use by Clare CAMS in the coming weeks. So at least they're getting space.
And the statement also then goes on that they are trying to recruit additional staff. Further consultant post has been approved and recruitment efforts are ongoing. And that there will be, I think it says here, 7 altogether. But Clare isn't alone, because last week the inspector of the CAMS facility across the country effectively informed the minister that the entire service is at breaking point and is deficient. And of course the HSE has accepted the recommendations, as they normally do. But very little actually changes. So
By the way,
it's I think it's very unfortunate that we always get to the low point, then the HSE have to respond. It's a reactive rather than having a system that is
proactive.
Yeah.
Are you trying to say to me, David, there's no proper planning in use?
Well, certainly in the HSE, there are so many different people who are supposed to be planning, and they're in the administrative sections and managers and so on. That I
Is
don't
that
know
about
what
to
they're
change
doing.
now with the introduction of the new regional?
Well, we're still waiting. This is Sláinte Care, which all political parties signed up for pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And it did propose the breakup of the HSE, the decentralisation of the HSE, because it is a monolith.
They've started the process of looking for staff to head up. And even the salaries for them.
Yeah.
You probably saw that yourself.
But will we see
In the
it?
paper.
When will we see it, John? I mean, the Sláinte Care was published. Is it 5 years ago? I don't know when it was published, but it was certainly pre-COVID.
Yeah. Well, isn't that an opportunity for politicians who may be listening to this programme to know that there are issues out there that will be critically important
At the next election. Yeah. Well, it is an intriguing one.
Just here now, earlier this summer, an internal survey of workers in Clare CAMS showed that almost all staff felt that the Clare CAMS clinical environment was unsuitable for support for young people. Indeed, all of those surveyed felt that the shortage of clinical space was putting children at risk. It also showed a very low level of morale among staff, with 88% of respondents already looking for new employment.
Yeah.
So all the people there, and I had a lady on Clare FM one morning there a couple of weeks ago when this report came out first, and she was with them for 12 years, and she said she was just absolutely frustrated, and she said she loved the job, but she was frustrated the way things were going and the way the HSE were treating.
Yeah.
Well, this hasn't started today or yesterday, and it won't be solved tomorrow or the day after.
Oh, the light-hearted one, Luke. What about the Pamplona, the Bull Run
Well,
in Pamplona?
we'll get to the Bull Run.
Oh, don't forget him now, because Shane...
I won't. Well, I'll tell you, okay, John, you want good news. You talk about good news. Page 12, because I'm going to talk about more depressing stuff after that. Shane supplies a brush with the Bulls of Pamplona. Tell us all about it.
Well, I mean, I have the benefit of the article on the page 4, was it?
Page 12.
Page 12. Bull Run. Do you agree with the tradition of having the Bull Run, which takes place this week or last week, every year, and guys usually test their bravado against fine young bulls, and Shane is reporting on it, and he had a ball. And he'd go back again.
This is Shane O'Brien, who is a former Clonlara hurler turned boxer you're talking about.
Yeah, well, he had good training now for the bull.
Well, the straight answer to your question is I don't like it. I think it's not. I think it's a tradition that the Spanish should get rid of, the same way as that this country got rid of all of its blood sports about 200 years ago, or most of them.
Is it
Yeah, I mean, we had bull baiting in this country. We had all sorts of cockfighting, dogs attacking bears, other dogs attacking dogs. Of course, that's still going on in certain, but it is illegal.
Did you ever, Pat, attend a cockfight?
No, John, no, I didn't. No.
Would it be behaviour that would be going on over in the mills at all?
I never heard of it anyway. No.
You never heard of it?
No.
It was common. It was common enough in the past. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Of course, it's betting. It's about gambling. But the Spanish seem to hold this to be very dear. But
yeah, I suppose, David, you could say it's tradition. Now it's a little bit like you've seen in the last few years the whole issue with Puck down in Kerry.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like now they're not going heisting him up for as long as he was previously. No, he's going to be down on the ground.
Yeah.
And the coursing as well. The coursing now, all the dogs are muzzled and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but
and there's a lot of people calling for coursing to be banned.
Shane, there was a bit of the article caught my eye in the second paragraph or second page of it, I suppose, second lines. I quote, I researched the course to avoid a section known as Dead Man's Corner.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but obviously...
obviously the bull wins on occasion.
Exactly. So, but listen,
I mean, we were always told as children, never go into a field with a bull.
Yeah.
And it seems odd that the Spaniards love going onto the roads and being chased by bulls. It's very odd and very strange.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, we'll move on, and that's the good news story, John. We're back to more depressing stuff now, and we're going to go back to Crusheen. but we're not talking about the railway link this time. Page 6 in the Echo. Padraig McMahon is writing there in relation to efforts to increase, I suppose, to incorporate traffic calming measures by Clark Supermarket and Service Station and by the GA grounds and the local primary school. In Crusheen. Now, I have travelled that road, been through Crusheen in particular, I'd say, more over the last 10-15 years, and there has been very significant development in Crusheen with a large number of housing estates. And we're talking about trying to look after, to have proper facilities and everything else like that up and running, and footpaths and all the likes of that. Crusheen is a dangerous place currently to be walking around. I know it's been bypassed, but there still is a lot of traffic going through there. Pat, you travel through there a good
Oh, there is, there is, and you can go up that way. I have to go up that way onto the motorway and onto the Galway Road.
It should be a shortcut, we'll say.
Yeah, so look at this, suppose they're trying to get the council maybe to the planning contributions to develop Crusheen footpaths around the village.
Great idea.
That's a good idea, John. Yeah. I've nothing trial against it. I like to see villages being developed and proper facilities put into. And
you look at it, we say, we have to be safer. We have to provide safer facilities. A perfect example of it last weekend, the Tulla Festival. that they had at the GA pitch, and
Yeah.
we were travelling back.
Great success,
We were
huh?
travelling back from the matches, but
Yeah.
a great success, and very well organised and very well run and everything like that. But one thing in particular that they did, they literally had a stop-go system outside the GA pitch to allow people to cross the road, manned by about 9 people.
I saw it myself.
Very impressive. But for people walking from Tulla, they had a footpath all the way out to the pitch. And they just had to cross the road at the ground.
And they had a fenced off barrier along by the road,
So
edge
there
of
was
the road.
no car parking. So your line of sight was perfect, and it was a very, very well organised event.
Does, yeah.
And I know, Pat, you've alluded to in the past that if they sort of took out a little bit of the
verge.
The verge.
Oh, yeah, the grass.
They could
For
put proper
parking.
parking.
Yeah.
Put in, yeah, if
Proper
they put,
parking.
if they put in a half
I'm
shoulder on at both
Yeah.
sides down along that road, Luke.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Joe Cooney actually about it, Joe.
Well, I hope you get your way, because I was travelling a few months back on that road, past the Tulla playing pitch, and it was very dangerous.
Dangerous, was dangerous.
There were
yeah.
cars parked on both sides
And
and people crossing.
And half
You
from
can't
out
see
the
the
road.
people
And
coming
you
down.
can't see them.
Yeah.
And there's very little warning. Very
It's
little
the
warning,
young
very
child
dangerous.
who breaks away from mommy or dad.
Yeah,
From behind the car.
I think
out onto
there's only one other solution there, because of course people will want to go. There are very popular matches there. The provision of a car, the GA has to buy an adjacent field for a car park.
You have a wide space on both sides of the road if the grass and the stuff is taken out, and put in a hard shoulder at both sides, a proper hard shoulder. You take all the traffic off the road.
But you still have people crossing the road,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's a busy road.
But you could look potentially at maybe pedestrian lights or something like that might be something that could be considered. But I think there are options to do work there. But listen, the people of Cosheen aren't going to get much anytime soon, but the area administrator for the Killaloe MD, Brian McCarthy, said he endorsed the view of his colleagues that planning contributions could be used to fund works. So this is sort of going back to how things should be, John, because the planning contributions paid by the people in the areas are generally supposed to go back into the provision of services for the people in the area.
Does that mean, Luke, then that if there is a lot of development in a particular area, okay, that as a result of that, there will be heavy contributions?
You would have thought. I mean, the reason for charging whatever they charge percentage,
They charge a huge
they
amount
charge
of
a
money.
huge amount of money. And if that's not then being spent in the improvement of paths. Now, the other thing I'd like to
the
know
point I
is,
wanted to make about that was, like the American system, where the local property tax dictates very often the quality of the services which you get. That puts, you don't have that here, but if, for example, I'm in a community which is expanding rapidly, which has contributed a lot of money to the actual county fund, I think my area should get heightened consideration.
well,
Do you
if
agree with
the
that?
developer has paid if you're developing a greenfield site here and you're putting loads of houses in and it's outside the town, somebody has to put the path in to connect with the town, and that's theoretically where that money should be going. Now, you bring up a very important point about the property tax. Our property tax should be going, I realise the government have a central pot where all the local authorities can apply for, including active travel, which they haven't been successful in acquiring here. But where do our property tax go?
It's all centralised, David, and it's a topic for another day because we're running out of time. I'm sorry. And we need to go to a few things. Page 6 in the Echo as well. Acoustic rock duo, the Keita brothers are performing a concert in St. Cronan's in Tipperary on Tuesday. So admission is free. That's the 8th of August, so get down to that. Page 13 of the Champion is normally where we go for East Clare. It's now moved next door to page 12.
But page 13 has a lot of East Clare stuff still.
So,
I would say most of the page is devoted there to the Scariff Harbour Festival, which of course is half over at this stage. It started on August 3rd and will finish on August 6th, and you have a picture there. I presume of the organising committee: Harry O'Mara, Marie Barrett, Saoirse O'Brien, Mike Rogers and Karina O'Brien at the launch of the festival. And by all accounts, it's, as usual, quite a big lineup. I suppose one of them, they always have and I'd love to know where the origin of this came from. They always have a kind of a Northern Ireland person or personage.
Well, John, you'll be able to explain this now today.
That's rather gentle.
In about 30 seconds, John, because we're out of time.
It goes back to the time that it anxious to promote a relationship between the southern communities and northern communities. They invited, who was it, Luke? They invited, what's her name? And him.
Oh, the names now, John. I said my memory will be gone.
But they were well-known unionists, whatever.
Yeah.
And very tight.
And I think a lot of it was to do with basically Waterways Ireland was a new
organisation
set up,
But
which was north and south. And Sheila De Valera was the minister at the time, responsible for getting the headquarters on the south side of the country put into Tungray.
Yeah.
Well, this year, Monica McWilliams, who people might remember was the co-founder of the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, who were there during the Belfast agreement discussions, and a kind of a non-political, I mean that they were the Women's Coalition, as I said. She'll be here and will be talking at the opening ceremony. It's over now at 6 p.m. on the Friday, but I think she's there at other points as well, is she? I can't remember now.
Yeah, I heard her this morning during the week on Clare FM, and she was delighted to be down, and she praised the Scariff Harbour Festival for keeping the Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland context going. And she was delighted to be come down, and she's delighted to be in a few debates and opening the festival.
Like last year, we'll say Stuart Dickinson, we'll say who's an MLA up there, we'll say with the Alliance Party. He was down, and we spoke to him on the radio. Now listen, we're out of time. Two things. On the road again, Shamrock Walking Tours, Scariff-based Shamrock Walking Tours return to the Scariff Harbour Festival again this year. Owner Marie McMahon, who also contributes to the radio, is set to lead a scenic 11-kilometre guided loop walk, said Sunday, part of the festival. So
and Luke Ardna free
admission, you can get back in.
Bring your friends with you.
Exactly.
From the summer.
Bring a friend. And then the other thing is East Clare to host a new festival Ideas, which is an event taking place. It's entirely volunteer-led, taking place in the cathedral in Killaloe, with the lineup being an eclectic mix of nature-inspired networking, music and talks. Included are forest bathing, hiking, a ukulele gathering, a design thinking workshop, and the core event, an evening of inspirational talks and music from near and far. There'll be a bit of crack at that, I'd imagine. So that's
the 6th to 7th of September it's on.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say the chances are we could be talking to a few people linked to that in the near future. Pat, we're out of time. Who are we finishing up with?
Well, we're finishing up with the Eagles, Luke.
Oh, Hotel California, is it? No?
Randy Minster of the Eagles, he passed away during the week, so we'll take it to the limit one more time.
Oh, well, Jesus, you take the time to the limit here of this programme anyway. But listen, pleasure as always, Janice, Pat and David, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Luke.
Local media this week, every Sunday, 2 o'clock, all going well. And actually it's at 3 o'clock, we'll say today, because Owen and Ruth have been live from the square in Scariff before us. But we'll be back to the regular time next Sunday, 2 o'clock, and hopefully Jim will be back in the chair. So from us, goodbye and take care. While discussing the papers on their regular weekly programme Local Media this week, an item caught the panel's eyes that they didn't have time to discuss. So the life of Sitting Bull's Clareman is page 1 of the living section on the Clare Champion, an article by Andrew Hamilton, and it's From Ennistimon to the Wild West, the story of Clare cowboy adventure and environmentalist Cutanani Brown. David.
Yes, there's a fine picture. This is on the front of the living, as you said, and there's a fine picture of said Ennistimon man. John George Brown was his original name, and he added Kootenay. I don't know how you pronounce it, but Kootenay, I think it must be Canadian or something like that. And he's a picture there around 1910. He's an old man by 1910, but he certainly led a very adventurous life. He was born in Ennistimon in 1839, the son of John Brown and Ellen Finucane, but tragedy struck, according to Andrew Hamilton, tragedy struck the family early and left him an orphan. Sort of the very typical type of, or stereotypical type of a self-made man almost. When you're orphaned, you have to make your way in the world, John, isn't that right?
Yeah.
He was raised by his grandmother and enlisted in the British Army in 1857. So at an interesting time in the Imperial service. He joined the 8th Regiment, served in India, sold his commission in 1862, so he wasn't long in the army, only about 5 years, and went off to seek his fortune in America, joined the gold rush in British Columbia, that part of Canada. There was a lot of people hoping to make their fortune at that time in that part of America. We often forget, we always think of the United States, but actually it's... Or Australia. Yeah. Actually, around the same time, the 1860s, there was a great deal of Irish people going off to Australia in the hope of striking gold. But like so many others, he never struck gold. But nevertheless, he was, as it says here, enamoured with life on the frontier. And we must remember, this was very much an unspoiled territory.
That's right.
Occupied by Native American tribes.
Who weren't friendly towards each other?
Weren't friendly towards each other and weren't friendly towards what we might call the invaders.
And the white man.
And the white, who were, and let's, when I was reading this, of course, I was struck, of course, this is the typical story of an immigrant who has made good, but we forget that these people were part of an effort to displace the people who were in this land before them. And of course, naturally, he was attacked by them. The story goes on, and this is where Sitting Bull comes in. He's part of the Pony Express, which is the mail service, I suppose. And at one stage, he was captured by Chief Sitting Bull, and Sitting Bull was one of the major leaders of the indigenous population, and I think fought Custer, didn't he, John? I think he did fight Custer.
Did he?
At the Battle of the Little Bighorn. But in any event, he was captured and with others, stripped naked.
Everything taken.
Everything taken from them.
Is that where they rolled while night was falling, and the powwows were going on? With Bull and the two lads rolled down the banks.
They slipped away
into the water.
And they got away. I'd say the Indians were probably, I shouldn't call them the Indians, the Native Americans were probably sick of them at this stage.
I'd say so.
Because I'd say very few got away from such tribes. But anyway, they went away buck naked, it says here, and they
whatever class of nakedness, buck naked.
Like a buck deer running away. But they eventually escaped anyway. His life is a very interesting one because ultimately he ended up on the borderlands between the United States and Canada. And I'm familiar,
you know that.
I know this territory. There is a national park which crosses Montana, Glacier National Park. And it's beautiful. Anybody would be enamoured by it. And eventually he does settle down in this particular territory. He settles in Canada and on the lands of the Kootenai tribe. It says here, the Kootenai people, and make their home. And I think he marries. We have a picture here.
Yes, she's a fine brothy woman, as I would say in the west of Ireland.
They probably would say that in the west of Canada as well. And they said, what's her name? They don't actually give. Olivia Lyonnaise of the Matis Native American tribe is her name.
She had a bit of French blood in her as well.
Well, I don't know. Does it say that?
It does,
there?
yeah.
Right, and of course the French did settle in that part of the world. So it's an interesting story, all right. And I suspect there are so many people from this country who had similar exploits, but it takes a bit of time. Unrecorded.
And there's an accident that got him into this story, isn't it? Purely accidental.
It was the Andrew Hamilton, I think, was looking at a movie. Pat, were you reading about that?
He was, yeah. And this man, he followed, he hunted buffaloes and wolves at one stage. And the oil was seeping up through the ground in at one stage, and they used to use it for the cats, and then they went prospecting for oil in the place. So that was an amazing story, really. Yeah. And it was all in the living section of the Clare Champion.
And this time again into the forefront.
Well, if they don't have the puka, they have the cowboy. and I think on that note, gentlemen, we'll leave it a week. That's the extra bit of local media this week. Tune in every Sunday at 2 p.m. And the programme is sponsored by Ruth Griffin Photography here on SBCR. So,
he died in 1916 anyway.
Very good comment.